for Lunchbox Connections. So please give yourselves a round of applause. Give yourselves a round of applause. All right, I want to introduce myself, and then we're going to get into Lunchbox Connections. And we still have people trickling in, of course. We have people still trickling in, so we will let them in as they come. So I am Nyla Latham. I am the graduate assistant for families, and I get to do great things and fun things like host Lunchbox Connections, which is my favorite thing in the world because I get to hang out with families, even though it's virtual. So let's get started. Once again, I want to say welcome, and we're glad you came today. VCU Family Programs does a lot of work to make it happen for you with our guests and partners. But yes, we just want to welcome you from the VCU Family Programs family. All right. What are Lunchbox Connections? So we have 3 things, and I also like to add a fourth thing. But we want you to connect. And through that, we want you to connect with our campus partners. We want you to connect with each other and to better learn more about VCU and what we have to offer. The second thing is we want you to learn. We want you to learn about things that that you didn't learn during, let's say, orientation, for example. We want you to learn new things that you already didn't know, but learn things that you probably did know, but you needed clarification on. Second thing is we want you to ask questions. Please ask us any questions that you may have. And yeah, we're going to give you a chance to ask our campus partners questions, and give them a chance to ask you questions as well. And third, we want you to have fun. We want you to have fun. So yeah. All right. We want to give some Lunchbox Connections 101 next. First, please mute your mics if you aren't speaking. 2, if you have any questions, raise your hand, put them in the chat function, or you can also use the Q&A function that is also attached to not Lunchbox Connections, Zoom. Let us know if you need anything and everything. We are here to support you and help you all as family. For Respect the Ramley, that is all of us, campus partners, families, parents. This is us. 5th, participate. Please ask any questions that you may have. We are here to answer your questions. We're here to let you give them feedback. Lunchbox Connections is here for you. All right, this is the point where Nyla stops talking and we get to our guest. So today's session is Housing 101, exploring on and off campus housing. We have 2 presenters. We have Stephanie Coates, who is our interim advocacy coordinator. And then we have Kevin Wade, who is our director of admin services for residential life and housing. All right, so I am going to stop presenting and I'm gonna have Stephanie go first.
Awesome, thank you so much, Nyla. All right, can we all see my screen? I think there's some yeses and agrees. All right, so hello everyone, my name is Stephanie Coates. I am the
Stephanie, we can't hear you, or can we?
Can you all hear me?
Okay. Yeah, you're good.
We can hear you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Coates. I'm the interim advocacy coordinator for the Office of Student Advocacy here at VCU, which is a great campus resource for students for all their advocacy needs. Another piece to my role is supporting students with off-campus student services. So I have a few slides up here. If you attended the orientation, you've probably seen some of these slides, but I just believe that reminding people of the knowledge is always helpful. And then at the end, I'm going to give you a little bit of tips and tricks that I just like to inform parents and students about the rental market in Virginia, and then kind of show ways that your student can better utilize my services or the services of Office of Student Advocacy. So how do we support students? We can help students with their apartment search. You, your student, whoever is interested, we can help you start the apartment search, whatever stage that you're at. So if you are looking for whatever off-campus accommodation, if you already found a place, but you just need to get a little bit more insight information because we do tour a lot of the properties in the area, we can help you with that. We review leases for potential apartments. We offer budgeting tips, and then we also help navigate landlord and roommate conflicts. There are some random things that pop up that if a student has questions about and they're living off campus, they can come to our office for that as well. We have a website, as you can see, offcampus.vcu.edu. That is the search engine website to look for properties within the VCU area. That's how they can find and go search. That's what it looks like. It is catered towards Richmond, greater Richmond area, and especially the VCU campus. So it helps students find spots that are always in the area or around the school, close in proximity. So if you are someone or your student is someone that is curious about finding a place that's closer to campus, this website is probably the best website for you to use for those resources. We also help with roommate selection. So I am not a matchmaker, so I cannot help your student find the best roommate match, but we do have a platform that I like to call a dating app sort of for finding friends and roommates. So that is available to students on the website if they sign up using their VCU email. So you have to create an account using your VCU email. So I know some folks and some parents, you may want to be really involved in this process, and I love that. But unfortunately, you're not able to create an account of this magnitude, or at least for the roommate selection for your student. But if you want to start having those conversations about how to find, essentially a housemate versus a roommate, right? You're not looking for a friend or you're looking for a roommate, that can help them out so that when they create their profile for the roommate selection on our website, they have a better idea of what they're looking for, or who they're looking for. And this is just a random fact that I like to share with some parents and some students about the market in Virginia. So this chart and these statistics are from May of 2023. So as you can see, at least from when I was in college, rent is high. It is very high in Richmond. And these are the numbers, as you can see, for like a 1-bedroom, the average cost of rent without utilities is $1,370. And that could be high for a new student or a student in general who's not working full-time. That sometimes might be high for me. So these are just some things to think about when you're thinking about renting in Virginia. There's other ways to kind of help cut down the cost of this. So a lot of the properties that are close to campus are student-centered properties. So they cater their rent to kind of match that a little bit. So the lowest I've seen so far for an apartment around the university area is $536. And that is in a property or a unit that is shared with other students. So that is a great way to cut down the cost, is by finding roommates. A lot of properties in this area do individual leases, which means that if there's 4 people living in an apartment, each individual has their individual lease and they are responsible for their room. So when it comes down to paying for rent, if there's ever in a situation where a roommate is just slipped and fell behind, wasn't able to pay that month, or had a situation and decided to leave the university, that will not impact your student. So individual leases is a popular key term that I want you, if you are looking for your student, or your student is, searching, they want to be independent on their own, remind them of those things. Look for properties that offer those individual leases, because that will protect them. And then also, in most situations, the bedrooms are a little bit cheaper. A lot of questions I get from parents, families, and students is about location. I can't guarantee a safe area. I don't know what a safe area might be for you. A safe area might be different for me. So I just tell students and families to just think about what it fits best for you. What do you want to see? In a perfect world, what do you want to see? So for some folks that live in the city, are like, hey, I just want to be a place where I know it's close to a hospital. Okay, great. So I can help you find apartments in an area that's closer to a hospital, or something that will make me feel safe is a place that has key fob access to get in and out of the buildings all day. Okay, great. We know some properties that have that. Location is key. So again, the Fan, Jackson Ward, Carver, Oregon Hill are walking distance from campus. The Museum District, Shockoe Bottom, Churchill, they're accessible by bike or bus or car. Shockoe Bottom and Churchill are typically closer to the MCV campus. So if you have students that spend a lot of time on the medical campus, you want to help them guide or look for apartments in that area. And we just always tell students, just, if you can, go into the area, go look at the property if you can, to see what you're looking for. We don't want to get scammed. And you're living there, so you want to make sure that you're comfortable in that area. So one thing I really want to push with you all today is our annual off-campus housing fair. This is happening on March 20th, 2024 in the Commonwealth Ballroom of the University Student Commons from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. This event is super, super, super helpful for students who are looking for off-campus accommodations. We have multiple properties in the area that come out, they table at this event, they offer rental specials, rental deals. We will have laptops available for students who want to apply to apartments on the spot. We're hosting, currently, if your student is living in a residence hall, we are hosting sessions inside the residence halls for students to learn about leasing in Richmond, to learn about what to look for, what to avoid, how to protect yourself, how to plan out your budget. We just had one in Rhodes and Brant this week that was super successful. Students came out and they had so many questions, so that way they can prepare for this fair. There's going to be food, there's going to be prizes, but it really is just a perfect opportunity for students to go face to face with these properties and ask them the important questions, and hopefully sign a lease so that way they can have housing accommodations for the next academic year. You're going to have guides with questions for the students to be able to see what kind of questions to ask a property, because sometimes that can be a little overwhelming. So we're going to help them and support them as much as we can to so that way they can make an informed decision when they are deciding to lease in Richmond. And then here is my contact information. That is my office number, but I always tell students the best way to get in contact with me is through offcampus@vcu.edu. Me or my student workers can respond to any question. There is no dumb question when you're trying to figure out the next steps in your future. So they can email us with random questions and we will work our hardest to answer those questions. They can also schedule appointments with me or my student workers to go through whatever stage they are in the process. Something else that I like to point out is that students that live off campus sometimes feel as if they aren't because they live off campus, they don't have the same availability or access to resources that are on campus. And that is not true. Everything that we offer to the students that live on campus, we offer to the students that live off campus. So again, I work for the Office of Student Advocacy, and I'll make sure I drop all these links in the chat for you all today, but they can always request assistance through our form and we will be able to support them. We really want to push students not feeling isolated when they are on off campus. They are a RAM on and off campus, and I'm here to support them in any way that I can, especially with their off campus needs. So thank you so much. And I'll make sure I drop all that information in the chat for you all.
Thank you, Stephanie. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to Kevin? You will have a chance to ask questions at the end, but just 2 or 3 questions between guests.
Hi, I asked some questions in the chat. One of my questions was, my daughter and I came up already to Richmond to kind of look at some apartments because she starts an undergraduate program in May at BCU. And there was a lot of talk about subleasing because I guess some people their lease ends in July, but I was kind of wary of it because I'm not sure, a lot of them, they don't know if my child will be able to continue the lease after, when they sublease. So I don't know if she could talk more on that or has experience in that. And also I wanted to know, could my grad student, she didn't graduate, she graduated ODU, but she's attending VCU for graduate school. Can she also attend that housing class or?
So thank you for that. So subleasing can get a little muddy sometimes. Essentially, when you're taking on a sublease, you're taking on someone else's lease and finishing out for them. Some properties are able to accommodate the student, especially if it's around the season when they are doing a lot of their releasings. The problem is, especially if your student's coming in May, a lot of times they ask those questions already in December or a little bit earlier to the current residents asking, hey, are you planning to renew your lease next year? And that's probably why some of the properties are saying they can't guarantee the properties. What I can say is if you are in that situation or if you want to prepare, there are so many properties that are offering leases going into the next year that are still open right now. And I would say also start that conversation with those properties, the property that your student is potentially interested in May. Start those conversations with them about, hey, can I be put on the wait list or anything if that's the property they choose to stay in? But I always suggest that there's opportunity for you to go look at other places and shop around and not put all eggs in one basket. I always recommend that. But that is something that does happen because they ask about releasing or renewing their lease typically around the fall semester. So if it's May, a lot of those folks who wanted to renew have already chosen to renew. And then in regards to the question about if your student who's a graduate student who wants to attend those sessions, I'm not sure they'll have access to the residence hall at that time. However, if they want to schedule a one-on-one appointment with me, and I will drop my booking link in this chat, they're happy to schedule a one-on-one appointment with me and we can go through that whole presentation. It's about 30 minutes. We can go through that entire presentation, just us one-to-one.
Okay, and my last question is, as we came around in January to look also, a lot of places only are doing leases from August to July. And I mean, how do you get around that? Because I think that's pretty much for the regular student, undergraduate, who's going to school from August to May.
Yes, a lot of the student-centered, student-focused properties typically schedule their leasing timeframes around the school year. But there are also a lot of properties that you can lease with and rent, and they have random, whenever you sign the lease, that's where your lease starts. And again, if your student wants to meet with me, I can send them a list of those properties that I know for sure are not essentially student focused and student centered if they're looking for something that's more long-term throughout the entire year. I can definitely help with that.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
There was a question, Stephanie, and Kevin, feel free to also tag in for this one if whoever knows more about this, but what percent of sophomores and juniors and upperclassmen live off campus versus on?
Sure. It's somewhat variable by year. And actually, when I talk about the returner student process, I'll get into that a little bit more. Historically, it's typically been about, 85% of the freshman class will live on campus. That group into sophomore year, about 50% of them will stay. Then that group into junior year, about 50% will stay, and so on and so on. That, by the time you get to senior year, most of the students are living off campus. Sort of conversely to freshman year, most of the students are living on campus. I'll talk in a few minutes about some changes we've made to our process to sort of better prioritize who we think needs the most support, and some changes we've made in the last 10 years and then a change this year to try to make sure we have more, certain groups have more access on campus housing than they had in the past.
Thank you. There's also one question in the Q&A feature. And if no one knows this answer, we'll make sure we get connected to someone who does. But if all of my students' college-related costs are coming out of a 529 plan, is off-campus housing a concern to maintaining the tax-free status of those investments?
I would definitely speak with student financial services. I can say in my 10 years of experience here and 20 plus years in the field, typically, if you have financial aid for on campus, you'll probably also have it for off campus. But always talk to your financial or to the folks in student financial services, because there are exceptions. But definitely ask that question and get those specifics.
I'm the one who asked that question. That's not financial aid. That is investments from our family members that pay out of a fund that's tax-free only if it's qualified educational expenses. So this year, everything was paid for with a check to VCU. So what happens when she rents off campus? Do I lose? Do my parents end up having to pay taxes on the money they invested for her education?
I would still speak with the student financial services, because that's financial aid student accounts, a number of different offices, and
Okay.
ask that question, because I don't know the specifics of that, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
One person I would definitely recommend if you call over there to talk with Kelly Coldiron. Would be the name that I would share. Reach out to her. She sort of knows a little bit about everything, and she works in financial services. But if you're talking to someone there and they're not sure, you could say, is it possible to talk with Kelly?
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Someone-
Can I just throw in one more thing? I'm sorry. I saw someone mentioned about financing apartment, and that is a really good question. There are multiple ways to finance the apartment as well. It's not always guaranteed, but you could also use like the refund that you may get from financial. A lot of students do financial aid to finance apartments. So if you want to talk, if anyone wants to talk about that on the side, because I know everyone's situation is more personal, I can also navigate that conversation as well and connect you to financial aid with that. But a lot of our students use like the refund that they get from not living on campus and not doing a dining plan to finance their apartment.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie and Kevin. I want to tell everyone that we will have this recording available to you all after the Lunchbox Connections, and we will send it out when it's uploaded, so it'll come in like your family newsletter, the same way you access all your information. So yes, for everyone who would like to know, we will have a recording later on our website. All right, we're gonna let Kevin have the floor next, and then we'll do questions after him. And
All right, can everyone see my slideshow? Do I have the right screen showing? Excellent. All right. So my name is Kevin Wade. I am Sort of Stephanie's a partner with the on-campus piece, and she works with our off-campus piece. Going to take some time today to talk through sort of the returning student process and sort of how that works. And like I said before, a couple of changes that we've made this year, sort of looking at how we prioritize things. Okay, so agenda for today, why live on campus? Talk about the process, what's different from last year, timeline, application, accommodations, housing options, and do we have enough housing? So why live on campus? We know a lot of things about students who live on campus that tend to be true, and one is they tend to have higher GPAs, they graduate sooner, or more likely to graduate and learn transferable skills. I bring this up here for two reasons. One is to sort of people talking about, what's the benefit of living on campus, but also to talk about, more importantly, there's nothing sort of magical about the residence halls or living in the residence halls that makes these things, happen, that makes these things more likely to happen. What it really comes down to is we know there's certain behaviors that students have that lend themselves to success in the classroom and things like that. And it's really about connection to the university. The more connected a student is to the university, the more likely they are to have higher GPAs and all those things. Connection to the university can take several forms. One of the things we know is a significant impact on academic success outside of the classroom is how much time they spend in the library. How much time are they going to study there and going to utilize the resources there? Similarly, when students join things like clubs and organizations, it tends to help their GPA. It tends to help them get more connected. Students tend to graduate sooner, all those things. Additionally, how often they interact with faculty outside of classroom time is another factor. And I bring this up to say the reason why students who live on campus tend to see the success at a slightly higher level than they're off campus is they're more likely to participate in those activities because they're on campus and they're there and they're at their sort of fingertips. So for students who are living off campus, whether it's commuting from home, living in an apartment or whatever it may be, when they're scheduling their time, like this is how much time I need to drive every day. This is how much time in class. This is how much time I'm going to study. Schedule time to say, this is when I'm going to join a club or organization. This is when I'm going to find a study group. This is when I'm going to go to the library. And if a student who lives off campus is doing those same things and utilizing those resources, they're going to have the same level of success as a student who lives on campus. Now, I talked about that and moved this up, but do we have enough housing at VCU, on-campus housing for everybody? And the answer is no. We know that. We've been working for years. I've been here for 10 years. We've added a lot of beds in that point in time. We're looking to add additional beds. We know that the number of students who apply for on-campus housing as sophomores, juniors, and seniors is more than the supply that we have. And so we've looked at several things in the last few years and looked to make some changes related to prioritization. And so the biggest thing up here, I'll talk about in a minute, this first one, the same room, same building sign up. When you know you don't have enough of a resource, you have to think about, okay, well, how do we want to prioritize to make sure it's going to the people that need it the most? So when we look at our students on campus, we know that the group who needs the most support from housing are freshmen. So we make sure we have enough housing for freshmen, which is something we've been doing for many, many years. The second group is your sophomores, right? Sophomores are just getting out of their first year. They're still learning things. Then after that, your juniors and seniors have a few more years under their belt. They're likely a couple of years older, and they're in a better place to navigate some additional things like off-campus housing. So what we've done is about 10 years ago, we preferenced sophomores in our process, meaning that when room selection happens, rising sophomores pick before rising juniors and seniors. But we had in there that rising juniors and seniors could do same room sign up or same building. So if I got assigned to a building, I could stay in that building for the remainder of my time there, as long as I kept doing the same room, same building sign up. But what that meant was we weren't taking as many beds to the actual room selection, and there were a decent number of our rising sophomores that weren't able to get on-campus housing. So to address that and to bring more beds to the actual selection, we've removed same room and same building from our processes, which is a significant change. So what that means is that, the number of students that we can house versus those we can't isn't going to change. All that changes is who is more likely to get housing. And so now with these changes, who's more likely to get housing is going to be your rising sophomores. So as you'd imagine, a lot of our rising juniors and seniors are not a huge fan of this change. A lot of them, were able to do same building and to stay in that same building and stay there. And like I said, when it comes down to it, it's looking at who needs the most support. And we really truly feel that rising sophomores on average needs more support than your rising juniors and seniors, and that's why we made this change. There's also some very specific information on here. Grayson Broad Residence Hall had been a 9-month contract. A 12-month contract. It's now a 9-month contract. ACL had been a 9-month contract and reverted back to 12-month because of some construction going on this summer. So right now, roughly half of our upper class beds are 12-month contracts. The other half are 9-month contracts. All of our first-year halls are 9-month contracts. So, that's really kind of the biggest thing here with the changes and things that are going on related to room selection is this change that we no longer have same building and same room. And while it's disappointing to some students, we do sort of feel that it will enable us to bring more beds to selection, which in turn means more rising sophomores will likely have the opportunity to live on campus in their second year. All right, so the timeline. The 24-25 returning student application assignment timeline, January 22nd, the returning student application opened. It's been open for a while. We got about 3,300 applications so far. Tomorrow at noon is when the application closes. So anybody who wants to participate in room selection and have the opportunity to select a room, they need to complete a housing application by noon tomorrow. There's no prepayment, incoming first-year students and transfer, there's a prepayment. There's no prepayment for returning students. You simply have to complete the application. It takes about 5 minutes. If a student doesn't select a room, they're not bound to the contract or anything. The contract only takes effect if they select a room in the process. So either if a student goes through the process and chooses not to select something, or a student goes through the process and is unable to select something, either way, they're not bound by the contract. On February 15th to the 20th, Transform Living and Learning Community, which is a program, a leadership program in the halls. Those students will select their spaces. They all live in West Grace North and a portion of that building. After that, on February 23rd, we will send an email with the general room selection time slot information. So everybody who signed up and completed an application that's not part of Transform will get an email saying, all right, your time slot is, February 27th at 3 o'clock. Or your time slot is February 29th at noon. And it will tell them when they can go into the system when it's their turn to log in and select a room. Students have the opportunity to form roommate groups. They can change their roommate groups up until the time they select. So if one friend decides they don't want to be there anymore, whatever the case may be, whatever internal drama is going on, they can address that and make those changes up until they select. If I'm in a roommate group with 3 of my friends, and I have the 28th at 4, but one of my friends has the 27th at noon, we will use the lowest time slot when we go to pick a room. So whoever has the lowest number or the lowest time is when we will go in and select a room. Then we can select an apartment and assign ourselves for those spaces. So this is different versus incoming first-year students. When you come in as a first-year student or a transfer for that matter, you fill out an application and list your preferences and we assign you. But as a rising sophomore, junior, senior, you go in and see what's available in the system and pick from what's available and select your own space. So the first 2 days of selection, February 27th and 28th, will be rising sophomores. The second 2 days will be rising juniors and seniors. We know at some point in time, we will likely run out of beds. Right now, the number of applications is more than the number of beds that we have. When that happens, we will send an email to everybody to get to select a room saying, unfortunately, we're currently out of beds. We give them the opportunity to get on a housing wait list that we manage throughout the summer, as well as there'll be resources from Stephanie's area about off campus. She and I will have a lot of conversations the next couple of weeks, coordinating our efforts and making sure that information gets to students that needs be. And part of the reason why the off-campus housing fair is when it is, it's after room selection is over. So if a student is unable to select it, then they can go to that fair to try to find off-campus housing or work to find off-campus housing more correctly. So that's the timeline that really for most students, the 3 dates they need to know is complete the application by noon tomorrow. On the 23rd, we will send them an email telling them when they go in and select a room, and then they'll go in and select a room on that date. A couple of quick things in application. There's no $250 prepayment. There's no preferences. So again, as you fill a first year application or a transfer application, you preference buildings. You don't do that in this application because you'll go in and select from what's available. And it must be completed to participate, and the date that it's due is tomorrow at noon. An email is going out to all on-campus students that have yet to complete an application, reminding them that they can go in and complete that application by noon tomorrow. One other thing as well, the returner student process is only for students who are currently on campus. If a student is off campus and would like to live on campus next year, they'll be able to participate when we open the new student process on April 2nd. So this is just for students currently living in the residence halls. And again, that's a prioritization decision we made that, we have a limited number of beds. So we made that change to prioritize the students that are currently living on campus. All right, accommodations. If a student has any need for an accommodation, they can submit that through Student Accessibility and Educational Opportunity. There's a form on their website for housing accommodations. We also from time to time get requests for students for religious accommodations. We don't have a set process for that, but it's similar to that. The student would contact me to let them know, this is the request they have, and I'd work with them to find out if that's something that we can accommodate or other ways they can manage, getting the resources they need. But for students that submit a request through SAO for a medical accommodation or, neurodivergent type of accommodation, we will work with those students, but know that accommodation does not increase your priority. So you would never get an accommodation that says this person's accommodation is their guaranteed on-campus housing. It would be for things like access to some private bathrooms or lower floors or ESAs or any of those types of things. But it doesn't improve your chances of getting on-campus housing. It's just if you do have on-campus housing, we'll work with you to get the resources that you need. So working through SAO, students can also contact me directly, and I'm happy to talk with them about that. Housing options, on-campus housing is for upper class students is all apartment style. We have full kitchens, they're furnished in the sense that they have things like, couches and beds. They don't have stuff in the kitchen, so you have to bring your own pots and pans and that type of stuff. There are appliances, dishwashers, washers and dryers in unit, which is very nice. I didn't have my own washer and dryer unit until I bought my first house. So it's very nice for students to have those washers and dryers in their unit to get their laundry done. It's typically 1 to 2 people per bedroom. Most of our bedrooms are singles, but there are some doubles in a couple of the buildings. And most of the apartments are going to be 4 people. So the vast majority of our apartments are 4 people in an apartment, each having their own bedroom and sharing 2 bathrooms. There are some 3-person apartments, some 2-person apartments, but nothing bigger than 4. And there are very limited 1-person apartments, but a very small number of those, and those are often used for accommodations. The contracts are 9 and 12 months, depending upon the building. And so depending upon if you're here throughout the summer, you want to look at that. If someone's in a 9-month contract and they need summer housing, we do have summer school housing and intern housing and things like that available as well. So it is a bit, if the student needs to stay year round with a 9 or 12-month contract, in both cases, we can make that happen. So this slide, which is not the best slide in the world, but on our website, this is just showing a screenshot of, we have virtual tours of all of our buildings. So you can click into the virtual tour. If you go to the housing website, housing.vcu.edu, you'll see a big link for a virtual tour. So you can kind of check out what the apartments are like. You can say, okay, maybe I want to try to live in Grayson Broad. And so you could pull up the tour of that and take a peek. And I believe that's Grayson Broad right there, actually. That you could take a peek, and Stephanie smiled because she used to run that building. And so you can see what the bedrooms are like. It's a 360 pano thing where you can look around. It also has some additional pictures of things like the bathroom spaces as well as common area spaces in the building. So just a great way to get some information and click on and check that out. So that's sort of the overview of the returner student process and on-campus housing. So I'm happy to take any questions that folks might have.
All right, we've definitely had some questions in the chat that Nyla and I were keeping track of. So the first one going back was, what are the numbers specifically about spots available for on-campus housing when it comes to rising sophomores, juniors, and seniors? And then if you're able to share about how many students have already signed up to be put in the queue for those spots.
Sure. So right now, there's about 2,200 upper class beds on campus. Right now we have about 3,300 applications. One thing we don't ever know is we also know there are a number of students who will sign up for fill out a housing application as a backup plan that might not want it, or they change their minds later and things like that. So right now it would probably going to be a situation where we aren't able to house everyone that wants it, but we'll see what happens when we get to room selection to see how that actually plays out. But as far as the numbers and likelihood, it just depends. I mean, obviously a rising sophomore is going to have a better chance than a junior and senior. There are some things some students can do if group of junior and seniors and a group of rising sophomores know each other, they could form a group together, and they would utilize the lower number for a way for a junior and senior to kind of be part of that. An earlier time slot is something they can do. But as far as the numbers, that's kind of how they look right now. I'm sorry, was there a second part to the question?
Yes, how many students have already signed up to be in the queue, basically the waiting list for open rooms?
Yeah, so right now the waiting list isn't enabled yet. We don't enable that until we run out of beds. In past years, the waiting list has been anywhere from 200 or 300 up to 900. We continue to work on it throughout the year. We're very diligent in making sure that we are giving regular updates. So typically when the wait list sort of starts in March, we'll send out an email saying you're on the wait list. We will give you an update in mid-April. And then mid-April we'll say, okay, right now we've been able to assign X number of people. We still have X number on the wait list. We anticipate some vacancies due to attrition at this point in time, and we will give you another update in May. And then in May, we continue to give updates. And depending, we try to be as honest as possible just to see, we might say, right now we do have a number of 0 credit students we're working through that could create vacancies, where you might say, at this point in time, we've seen very little movement. So you definitely want to make sure you're focusing on off-campus plans as well. Sometimes students will remove themselves from the wait list. The wait list this year will give students the opportunity to preference, like, we do have some double bedrooms, we have some single bedrooms. Some students might want a single but not a double. So we'll be able to preference that. That way it'll help us kind of move through the wait list a little bit more quickly. When we have a space for a student on the wait list, we will email them and call them to say, there's a space available. It's yours for the next 2 days. If we don't hear back from you, we will move on to the next person. So it's definitely important to be checking emails and stuff throughout the summer, especially if you're on that housing wait list.
Awesome. The next question is, if a student lives off campus their sophomore year, can they apply for an on-campus housing junior year if they want to move back? Does it make the application harder for on-campus housing in this circumstance?
And so with that, I sort of spoke to a little bit more, but just to kind of clarify more, the returning process that's currently going on is only for students who currently live on campus. And it's for that very reason is to sort of increase the priority for the students that are currently living on campus. If a student is living off campus and would try to return to campus, the housing application reopens April 2nd. They can go in and complete the application at that point in time. They'll go directly on the wait list and they'll go beneath the students who went through the returner process. But again, all depends upon sort of how things are going, people's patience. But a lot of times, some of those students that get on that wait list even later in the summer end up getting housing. It just depends upon, sort of how things play out and mainly sort of your patience with it. That, the longer you wait on the wait list, let's say you wait on the wait list and don't make a decision and stick around and don't look off campus until late in August, then we're unable to house you. Off-campus housing is going to be that much more tight. So what we typically advise students to do is once you're on the wait list, look at off campus. If you find a place you think you like off campus, before you sign the lease, contact us and say, hey, I'm on the wait list. Well, how does it look? And I might say, you know what, you're number 4 and I'm going to get a couple of vacancies, so I'll be able to get you. Or I might say, you're number 500 and we have had no movement on the wait list in the last 3 weeks, so you probably should sign an off-campus lease. So definitely reach out to us and we'll do our best to be kind of let you know what's going on, what that situation is like, so you can make the best decision.
James, would you like to answer your question? Ask your question, I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you. So my question is this. So once you're a sophomore, are there certain dorms that you go into that you could possibly stay in for the remainder of your duration at VCU? So I guess they're almost like you go into it as a sophomore and then you kind of stay in that particular dorm until you graduate. Is that possible?
In the current process, no, that's kind of what we had changed. We used to have that ability, but we changed it this year because again, we sort of feel a junior or senior has a better skills to look at off campus than on campus. So, a student can get in their sophomore year. Now it might be possible, depending upon how numbers are in the future and how it works, that they'd be able to stay on as a junior and senior. But someone being able to say and sort of, they used to use a term like homestead their room to say, okay, before we even do process, people can kind of claim their room for the next year. We no longer have that ability. And the whole reason why is to bring more beds to room selection to increase the likelihood for rising sophomores to get housing.
All right, our next question is, if a roommate group is formed and does the first roommate get to sign up for the spot, which signs the whole group up for the spot?
So, if it's a group of four and whoever has the earlier number, they have to be there to log in, but pretty much any one of the four can actually go in the system and assign different people. So it really is something they'll want to discuss and talk about ahead of time. But really anyone can go in there and make those changes once they've sort of entered the system when it's their time to pick.
Mike, if you want to answer or ask your question, Natalie, you got me saying it too.
I had a follow-up to that question. My son has 3 good friends, and they've signed up a group of 3. Can they sign up for a 4-person dorm room, and will you assign someone else, a random person to join them?
So yeah, if it's a group of 3, they can stay a group of 3, they can sign up for a 3-person apartment or a 4-person apartment, but that other bed we wouldn't assign someone, another student would then go in who's by themselves and select that space. So, and I'll say if it's 3 people in a 4-person apartment, they will definitely get a 4th. There's no doubt about that with the numbers that we're at right now. And let's say they decide they wanted to find a 4th person. The application closes at noon tomorrow, but they can change their roommate group up until the 27th of February. So there's still time to find different people and do different things if they'd like to do that.
Awesome. Someone asked, and I believe this was about on-campus apartments, and if whoever asked this question, it's about off, please feel free to correct me. But can you clarify the process for on-campus apartments? That was the question, I guess, just in relation to other housing types.
Sort of meaning, so what does an apartment have versus our other types? When you look at on-campus housing, there really are 3 different types of housing. There's apartments, suites, and traditional style. Traditional style and suite is just for freshmen. Apartment style is for all students. And really kind of looking at it, if you live in a traditional style, like in Rhodes or something like that, you just have your room with the shared bathroom into the hall. If you live in a suite, you're going to have a couple of bedrooms, a couple of bathrooms with a shared common area. An apartment's going to be the same as that, but it's also going to have a kitchen and laundry facilities. Most of our apartments are 4-person, single bedrooms. We do have a mix of all kinds of different types. Students are responsible for cleaning it completely themselves and providing their own toiletries and all that good stuff as well. They also can cook. They don't have to have a meal plan if they live in an apartment style hall. Some students will get one just for ease of that. But another way that students can save money is cooking themselves versus getting a meal plan, depending upon how good of a cook they are and how good they are at shopping and finding deals. But as far as that, that's really the primary difference between an apartment and the other halls that we have on campus.
Thank you. And then I'll ask 2 in one go just for the sake of time, but do TRIO students get preference in lottery for on campus? And if they do, how does that work? And then the second question is, and it's kind of tied into what you were just talking about, but do individual students need to fill out individual applications? Someone thinks that their son might have done one as a group. So if you can just clarify that.
Sure. I'll answer the second question first. Everyone has to do their own application. So everyone has to do, so if there's a group of 4, it should be 4 applications, and then they join a group together. But for on-campus housing, there are no group applications. And as far as the TRIO question, we work with TRIO to try to do our best to make sure that TRIO students are in sort of the earlier numbers so that they do have a slight better priority, but it's still not guaranteed.
That's helpful. Okay, awesome. We've got about 5 more questions in the queue, and if people chat them, if we don't have time to answer every question, we can make sure we get them answered, and we'll send this out to the registrant list of everyone who came today. So you will get answers to your question, if not in the session. Someone asked about the large building that overlooks Monroe Park that's being renovated, and if you know when that's expected to open.
Well, right now there are no current on-campus housing that is being renovated that's looking to open. I do know there is, I forget the name of the apartment that's sort of a little bit off the park.
Parkview.
Parkview, and I believe that opens this coming fall.
Awesome. Are utilities included in the cost of the 9 and 12 month off-campus housing contracts? So Stephanie, if you can address that.
Yeah, so most apartments, because of the market, are moving away from covering all utilities. So what a lot of the apartment, property management companies do, they'll cover water, especially the student-focused properties. They'll cover water, Wi-Fi, and cable, and they'll add a credit to the account for gas and electric. Most of them are electric, so they'll add a credit to the account for electric. So they'll only cover up to a certain amount, and then the rest of it is divided amongst the students. Keep in mind, some properties do not set up the accounts for the students. The students will have to go out and set it up themselves and figure out amongst each other how they're going to divvy up the cost. Not all properties will do all that for them back end, but yes, no is the long answer, or the short answer, that a lot of properties do not cover all utilities like they used to do.
Yeah, definitely check those leases, because there are some places, one thing that's somewhat common, especially in the properties closer to campus that specifically work with students, is they might cover like $40 of electricity for the month. And so if the bill is $40, it's covered, but if it's 50, the student's paying 10 of that. And students learn pretty quickly how quickly the electric bill can go up.
Yes, I always tell students, whatever you're anticipating to pay in rent, always add about $100 to $150 to that. And that's not saying that you would have to spend $100 or $150, but at least you would have considered that in your budget. So in case there is an emergency or something happens, like for students who choose apartments where they stay on campus or they stay in their apartment all summer long and they're running the air and TV all day, you want to be able to consider that in case something happens and you can pay it. Because VCU, we don't offer like assistance with paying for utilities or anything like that.
All right, there are 2 more questions here, and then I do think we got some more in the chat since this was us updated, but are there on-campus housing options for summer terms?
Yes. Depending on the summer term, a lot of our 12-month contracts will cover that. But additionally, we do have summer housing available. So if a student needs housing for the summer, they don't have housing otherwise, they can work with us to sign up for that. And that application opens in April. And that's typically, I want to say it's maybe like $250 a week or something like that. And they're week contracts that we sign up there where students can stay, so they can correspond that to their actual classes, because there's different terms for the summer. Not everyone's here the whole summer. We also have intern housing, so if a student's doing an internship and they're not actually taking courses, where they could stay on campus with us as well. But all that information is on the housing website.
All right, just to maybe do some rapid fire. So we spoke about new incoming sophomores and above. Housing opens on April 2nd. Is there going to be room for new students, or do you put aside a certain number of rooms for new students?
For the only thing we set aside is first year beds, which are pretty much in first year halls anyway. So incoming first year students that apply on April 2nd, we have beds set aside, but beyond that, no, it's just based upon what's available. We do have attrition. We know we're gonna have attrition every year. So that's really where those spaces come available throughout the summer, that we're able to assign students to.
Okay, awesome. And then in the chat, we've got, if there's a friend group of 3, is there a world where they could pick a 2-room apartment and that third person is kind of left out, or are they required to pick only from 3 or 4-person rooms?
That's where it can get kind of interesting, and we want to make sure that groups have good conversations. It is possible that we have a 3-person group and 2 people leave that group and go out on their own and sign up without the third person. So definitely want to talk through contingencies and backup plans on that. Because if students sign up for a group, they're not bound to that forever. They can change it, leave the group, or reform the group as they see fit.
And then the last question is, I believe, Stephanie, if you want to take this, about if students sign any leases or contracts at the housing fair, do they typically allow them to sign without a parent to co-sign?
So it's very rare for students to find a property in the area without a co-signer or a guarantor, just because of credit score, leasing history, all of that stuff. But if they which is very rare, but if they are able to sign this themselves, they will let them apply for the apartment on the spot. If they need a co-signer, most properties will allow them to apply on the spot, but they will not approve anything until they receive co-signer or guarantor information, which can be faxed to them. They don't necessarily need you all to be there in person to help them with that. One thing I like to remind students and families to look out for, a lot of properties utilize a system called automatic leasing. When you apply for an apartment and you basically say, hey, because students don't really understand it. So they're like, I'm applying for this apartment and I'm signing for myself. I don't need a cosigner or guarantor. A lot of properties will automatically send a lease to the student through the platform because they are assuming that you can afford it yourself. Well, unfortunately, some students think that that means that they have the apartment, they have the lease, they sign that lease and it locks them into a financial contract with them. And they are held responsible for that apartment. And they just have to find a way to pay it. So we don't want them to be in that situation. So just warn your students about that, not signing any lease until all financial documentation is received and approved by the property.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Well, if you all have other questions that you weren't able to ask or maybe come up after this, both of our presenters did share their information in their presentation, but I do believe, yeah, Stephanie just dropped hers. Kevin, if you have a second to put your email in the chat, I think that would also be super helpful. And then I did want to just say the last few seconds, if you are able, we do have a little engagement survey. We're just trying to make sure that these are beneficial to you all. I'm going to just display a little QR code. And so as you are logging off, if you have a second, it shouldn't take too long. Just scan the QR code and let us know how your experience was today. But thank you again to Kevin and Stephanie and for everyone who came today. We hope that this was super informative and that you feel a little bit better about this process. I'll leave the QR code up for a little bit, but I think we can call it a day. So thank you so much, everyone. Alrighty, I think as most people have already logged off, but just in case there is anyone else left, I'm just gonna put the family email in here. Most of you have it, you all get the newsletters, which is why you're here. But if there's anything else that y'all need, feel free to always reach out to our office and we'll try and help you out. All right. Goodbye, everyone. Have a good rest of your day and a good rest of your week.